The next team that we're going to go and talk about is eStar, because actually the majority of questions I received were around eStar, which tells me that the majority of questions I receive from people are from people who actually watch LPL. So eStar are the, the team that is at the top of the standings along with Invictus Gaming. And everyone is kind of looking at this team and we're just like, how? Right? Because they don't have a lot of like really big names. I'm going to go over some of their names, but first question mentions two of them. What is your opinion on eStar's strength as individuals? Have been incredibly impressed by Cryan and Xiaoxi thus far. And then the second question is just where would I rank eStar currently? Now, I would rank eStar still technically below Invictus Gaming, below the current form of FPX, and then also below JDG, despite their loss last night. I don't know if people were watching, but they lost. The thing with eStar is that they're a group of young, talented players who were all trainees or had played in LDL. Most of them are actually from Royal Club, like the Royal organization. And I think there are a few things that are shocking with this team. One, they hadn't announced their roster officially. Like they submitted it on time, but they hadn't announced it officially until days before the LPL started, outside of their starting 80 carry Wink. The second reason is just that I think whenever you have a bunch of rookie players, often you don't expect them to skyrocket the standings, right? Like you kind of expect them to maybe take games, maybe take the occasional series, but generally look, uncoordinated or just not have the same kind of understanding of the game that top LPL teams have. eStar individual players that have been really impressive. Xiaoxi actually had this awful Leona game at the beginning of this season, and I was very, very concerned with this team. However, I think that, since then he has been really instrumental in facilitating a lot of the things that this team wants to do, particularly because they've had an incredibly heavy Thresh priority. Getting Xiaoxi's hands on Thresh has been super important. And actually, if you notice, Suning was one of the only teams that banned it, I believe, first rotation against them. And that's probably because Sword Art knows Xiaoxi very well because they used to play together on Flash Wolves. And Xiaoxi was kind of behind Sword Art, I guess, studying under him, or just because Sword Art is a like individually superior support or just better piece of that team, like primary shot caller, voice, etc. But Xiaoxi has really surprised me, especially since I did watch him on Flash Wolves and thought he was okay. Not great, not bad, just kind of okay. I think what they've done is, again, prioritize Thresh for him really heavily and then make sure that he can somehow get unlocked so that he can affect mid, because the other like really impressive carries on this team are actually, I would throw Wink in there. I think it's both Cryan and Wink have played really well. And Wink is also another royal trainee that people knew of, and Cryan as well. He also played for Young Miracles. And these are the two players that you're really looking to carry this team. And individually, Cryan in particular has been really good. So I think it's a combination of the fact that this team, they do make a lot of mistakes. They have a pretty heavy, they like to have a pretty heavy dragon priority. If you notice how EDG kind of took advantage of some of the mistakes they make, is that sometimes they'll give up tempo or they'll give up minion waves to go after objectives like dragon. In the specific game I'm talking about, which is game 1 of EDG eStar, they ended up, I believe, swapping their bot lane mid and then to Herald, and then Wei got caught out and beaten up by EDG. So then they basically gave up the priority that they'd had and chucked it over to EDG. And this is something that eStar have done several times in some of their games, which is why they do look sloppy. However, they also have been team fighting really, really well in the mid to late game. And that is also how they've won some games. If you look at their series against LGD, which was not the best showing from both teams, I'll just say. It was a very back and forth game. But I think you can see a lot of eStar's high highs and low lows there. And that is actually why I am putting them below the other teams I mentioned, just because I don't think they're as good yet. But I really like the potential that there is on eStar. So, and speaking of that EDG eStar series, we got one question from the program, my friend, and hopefully yours, iCrystallization on Twitter. Despite EDG's head coach Clearlove and starting jungler JJ being stuck in Hubei, EDG still managed to pick up a relatively clean 2-0 against eStar. Was it a lucky win, or is this team slowly meshing well? I think it was actually not a bad showing from EDG. I think they've looked improved as they've gone along, and you could see that last night too. I think no one wants to be in the position that Jinja is, because he is like, you know, uh, filling in as, I believe, their third starting jungler. And no one was expecting them to beat JDG. And also, Rixoki brought this up in the chat, and I'm sorry if I pronounced your name incorrectly, but he mentioned that, or they mentioned that Audi played really well, and I was actually surprised that they started Audi, because they've been playing with Xiaoxiong for and he's their most rookie player right now, because they can't start Jinu because of import rules, because Jinja is a PCS player, and they don't have a Chinese jungler available to start. Again, because of travel bans due to the coronavirus. So I've been pretty impressed with how Jinja has stepped in and performed for EDG. I don't think he's been it hasn't been one of those things where he's been insanely good, but he's been surprisingly solid, and I think the team has been meshing pretty well together. The most startling thing you might see, as someone who's watched EDG for a while, is that he'll actually go topside, which means that regardless of whichever top laner is starting, it's kind of a new departure for EDG, because they've always been an insanely bot lane focused team, to the point where they would always just be trying to hammer down that bot lane turret super early. So yeah, I think it's a combination of both. But I think since you asked this question, you can see a marked improvement from that performance to last night's performance as well.